Perhaps you didn't know that there's two different words in the English that are translated vision in the book of Daniel. The Hebrew underlying text uses two different words, at least in the book of Daniel, which are translated into one single word, vision, in English. Those words are mare and hazon, or kazon. Okay? They have slightly different connotations. And the way they interact is lost in the English version, which may or may not have implications. I would argue, indeed, it does. But let's look at the meaning of these terms and how they're used in the Hebrew Bible. And then I'll show you what I mean in the text. Okay. The vision referred to in Daniel 9 and 10, 14, bring up a discussion of the technical terminology applied by Daniel to the different aspects of the revelatory experiences he had. When Gabriel said to Daniel, "The vision is for days yet to come," as recorded in Daniel 10:14, this is the fifth occurrence of the English word vision in the translation of chapter 10. But it is only the first occurrence of the Hebrew word hazon. The Hebrew word used in the preceding four instances in this chapter, chapter 10, is mare. Mare comes from the root ra'ah, which is the common verb used 1,140 times in the Old Testament for the idea of seeing. Hazon comes from hazah, which appears much less frequently in the Old Testament, and which generally refers, although not exclusively, to the more specific act of seeing in prophetic vision. As a noun, hazon is used only of prophetic visions, whereas mare is commonly used in contexts not connected with prophecy. Mare refers to that which can be seen with the natural eye, be it spots on the skin, as in Leviticus 13:3, the attractiveness of something in Genesis 2:9, or unattractiveness, Isaiah 53:2, of what is seen. What a person looks like, including his stature, 1 Samuel 16:7, or Song of Solomon 5:15, or everything that can be seen by the eyes, see Leviticus 13:12. Generally, it should be noted in this connection that mare refers to some aspect of the appearance of individuals or personal beings. With this information in hand, we may turn to the use of these words in Daniel 10. Daniel introduces this passage in verse 1 by stating that he understood the word and had understanding of the mare, or appearance. Daniel does not at this time state that he received a hazon, vision, but that he saw a mare, appearance. Sometimes it's translated appearance. Mare can be translated as vision, just like hazon, but sometimes, at least in the King James in particular, mare is, depending on the context, often or sometimes translated in English as appearance, which is like a vision. From what follows in the chapter, it is obvious that the appearance to which he referred was the appearance of God, as recorded in verses 5 and 7, which state, "Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like a beryl, and his face is the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. And the voice of his words was like the voice of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves." This description of this being is attributed to Christ in the book of Revelation in the New Testament. Just so it certainly is Christ, or the eternal Son, manifesting in his pre-incarnate state to Daniel at the time it is written. After recording the splendor of God that he saw, Daniel states, And I, Daniel, alone saw the mare, the appearance. For the men who were with me did not see the mare. But a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great mare, and no strength was left in me. When Gabriel subsequently came to Daniel, he explained to Gabriel, O my Lord, by reason of the mare appearance, pains have come upon me. Verse 16. Mare is used not only for the appearance of God as a whole, but it is used also in verse 6 to describe his face in particular, which had the appearance of lightning. Mare is also used once for Gabriel in this chapter in comparing his appearance to that of a man. Note also in this connection that mare is used for the appearance of God and his heavenly escort. You can see it in Ezekiel 1 and 10, these instances, as well as chapter 8 verse 4 and 43:3. From the description of Daniel's experiences on this occasion, it is evident that in 6 of the 7 instances where mare is used in this chapter, chapter 10 of Daniel, he referred thereby to the appearance of God, which he saw as recorded in verses 5 and 7. He does not use the word hazon anywhere in this chapter to refer to that appearance. Thus, a sharp distinction is drawn here between the use of mare, which refers to the appearance of God as seen by Daniel on this occasion, and the use of hazon for the vision in verse 14, which Gabriel said would be for many days. This distinction indicates that hazon must refer to some other vision than that of the appearance of God described in chapter 10. Thus, the hazon mentioned here logically points back to the preceding vision of Daniel 8, just as the similar reference in Daniel 9:23 does. That is the only vision called by the word hazon in the context, the immediate context. And chapter 9:23 says, at the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I have come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. In Daniel 8:17, Gabriel told Daniel that the hazon was for the time of the end, just as he told him in chapter 10, verse 14. It would be for days yet to come, for many days in the future, for the time of the end, and for days yet to come is the hazon referred to by the angel or by Gabriel in the context of Daniel 8 through the end of the book, which is, by the way, where it reverts to Hebrew, and when 7 and previous chapters were in Aramaic. Further emphasis might be placed at this point on the distinction between mare and hazon elucidated in Daniel 10. Mare appears to refer more specifically to the appearance of a personal being in vision. As was the case with God here, whereas hazon here refers back to the prophet's earlier view of the beasts and their activities, in Daniel 8 particularly, and then it's referred to in Daniel 9, and then once more in Daniel 10, in opposition to the appearance of God himself, Christ, pre-incarnate Christ, so let me say that again. The hazon here refers back to the prophet's earlier view of the beasts and their activities, representing the kingdoms, which represent the rise and fall of nations and their relations with God's people and his agencies. The distinction drawn here can now be applied to the occurrences of these two words in chapters 8 and 9, where their distribution and function are somewhat more complex. The word hazon, or vision, occurs in two main contexts in these two chapters, both of which satisfactorily fit the definitions derived from this word here, chapter 10. In the first case, hazon has to do with the vision of chapter 8 generally. This chapter begins with two references to the hazon that Daniel saw in verses 1 and 2, which clearly include his view of the beasts and their activities that are there to follow. In verse 13, two holy ones were seen and heard discussing the scenes Daniel was witnessing, and one of them asked the other, how long or until when shall be the hazon according to the details enumerated in the question asked by the Holy One, obviously he referred to the selected element seen especially in the latter part of the overall Hazon, which covered, up to that point, what is described in verses 3 through 12 of Daniel 8. On this basis, it can be said that all of what is described as seen up through verse 12 clearly classifies as a Hazon. In selected elements seen especially in the latter part of the overall Hazon, which covered up to that point what is described in verses 3 through 12. Oh, whoops. Let me just say that again. In verse 15, Daniel referred again to the Hazon he had seen, which from the evidence just discussed certainly includes verses 3 through 12, regardless of how verses 13 and 14 are related to the Hazon described there. In the second instance, Hazon appears in the particular context of a theme referring from this point on to the end of the book. That theme has to do with the instruction that the prophecies given to Daniel were for many days hence, for the time of the end, and consequently they were to be shut up and sealed until that time, which comes to the resurrection, the second coming, if you're a New Testament Christian anyways, to the time of God sending up his everlasting kingdom. We first meet the theme in Daniel 8:17, where Gabriel instructs Daniel, "Understand, O son of man, that the Hazon vision is for the time of the end." At the time of the end, at the end of this interlude of instruction, Gabriel returned to this theme. Shut up the Hazon, for it pertains to many days hence. Daniel 9:24 also refers to sealing up the Hazon vision, and we have already cited in chapter 10, verse 14, where Daniel was told that the Hazon vision was for days yet to come. The last two passages in which this theme is elaborated occur in chapter 12. In verse 4, Daniel was told to shut up the words and seal up the book until the time of the end, when knowledge concerning the prophecies would increase. In verse 9 of the same chapter, Daniel was told that the words were shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Thus, this theme occurs as an envelope around Gabriel's instruction to Daniel in chapter 8, in verses 17 and 26, and again around his instruction to Daniel in chapters 10 through 12, namely chapter 10, verse 14, which reads, "Now I've come to make thee understand that shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the Hazon is for many days." Or chapter 12, verse 4 and 9. "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal up the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." And he said, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed and sealed up till the time of the end." And it occurs at the beginning of the prophetic message he gave to Daniel in chapter 9, verse 24. That is, the 6 things that have to be completed within the 70 weeks, which are determined to do the 6 things, one of which is, make atonement for iniquity, make an end of sins, bring in everlasting righteousness, anoint the most holy, and seal up the Hazon vision. The similarity between the roots of the 2 words used in these passages relates them according to the type of activity they describe, and the time factor referred to in these verses is similar, for many days or to the time of the end. The words that were to be shut up or sealed up refer to the didactic or explanatory words of instruction that Gabriel brought to Daniel, as is clearly explained in Daniel 9:22 through 23, which reads, "And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I have come to show thee. For you are greatly beloved, therefore understand the matter and consider the vision." Thus the word should be carefully noted as the third of 3 terms employed by Daniel for the prophetic information he received, along with Hazon or vision and Mare or appearance. The reference to the book or scroll in 12:4 appears to signal that Daniel's prophetic ministry had come to an end and that all the information revealed to him through these 3 avenues was to be compiled. That verse says this, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." From these two main examples of the use of hazon in chapters 8 and 9, we may turn to the occurrences and use of mare in the same chapters. As a response to Daniel's desire expressed in 8:15 for further understanding of the hazon, and it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the hazon and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance or mare of a man. The voice of God is recorded in verse 16 as instructing Gabriel, make this man understand the mare, appearance. The thesis proposed here is the two words used here, hazon and mare, are not used as synonyms, but that they are used as technical terms to refer to different aspects of this prophecy, and that God used the word mare to call the attention of Gabriel and Daniel to a particular part of the prophecy. He seeks to understand the hazon, the mare of a man appears, and that man tells Gabriel, make him understand not the hazon that he wanted to understand, but the mare. Then he approaches Daniel and says, the hazon is for many days in the future. So he's not answering Daniel's request. He's zooming in on a portion of it. And the distinction is made by the use of the two different terms, which is lost in the English. Although Daniel's reference to the hazon in verse 15 could be all-inclusive on the basis of analogy with the use of the word in chapter 10, it is proposed here that the references to the mare in 8:16 refers more specifically to the appearance of personal beings, in this case, the holy ones, in the scenes Daniel saw at the end of the vision. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the mare. Thus, it is suggested that the mare referred to in verse 16, which I just read, should be applied more specifically to the intravisional discussion and explanation carried on by the two holy ones and their appearance to Daniel. This point receives some support from the next reference to the mare in chapter 8, which occurs in verse 26. And the mare of the evenings and mornings, which was told is true, wherefore shut up the hazon, for it shall be for many days. The first point to note about the mare here is that it is the mare of the evenings and mornings. Where do the evenings and mornings occur earlier in the chapter? They occur in the intravisional converse held between the two personal beings, the holy ones, in which one told the other that it was to be 2,300 evenings and mornings until the sanctuary would be cleansed or restored. Because this mare is specifically labeled as the mare of the evenings and mornings, it should be related directly to the mare or appearance of the two beings who discussed the evenings, mornings earlier. The second point about the mare is that it was told, nimar or nafal or passive form of the verb to say. It was not seen. Thus, Daniel did not see the 2,300 evenings and mornings. He heard them discussed by the two holy ones in their intravisional explanation during their mare or appearance to him. A hazon vision is seen, but a mare is both seen and heard because the personal being who appears to the prophet in the mare also speaks words of information or propositional truth to him. The same point is borne out by Daniel 10:8 and 9. I was left alone and saw the great mare appearance of God. Then I heard the sound of God's words. According to Daniel 8:16, Gabriel was instructed to cause Daniel to understand the mare or appearance. At the end of Gabriel's explanation, however, Daniel still did not understand it. The last verse of chapter 8 says this, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for certain days. Afterward, I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the mare, but none understood it. As a result, God subsequently sent Gabriel a second time to explain the mare. Thus, when Gabriel appeared to Daniel, as recorded in 9:21, he did not refer him to the hazon vision in general, but more specifically, he referred him to the mare, which Daniel did not understand. Daniel 9:21 says this, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the hazon at the beginning, from chapter 8, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. Perhaps The particular part of the instruction from the Mare that Daniel did not understand and that shocked him so much was how the little horn power would trample down God's host, his sanctuary, and its sacrifice underfoot for so long a period of time as the 2300 evening and mornings mentioned in this connection. Thus, there is a direct connection between the prophecy of Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 insofar as the prophetic terminology involved is concerned, and the terminology is applied here to a specific aspect of the prophecy of Daniel 8, that which stemmed from the intravisional mare or appearance of the two holy ones to Daniel. Because mare is also applied to Gabriel on one occasion in Daniel 10:18, one might consider the possibility that the reference to mare in Daniel 8:26 and 9:23 could include the explanatory information given to Daniel both on the occasions of the intravisional appearance of the two holy ones in Daniel 8:13 and 14 and the extravisional appearance of Gabriel in Daniel 8:15 through 26. However one relates these two appearances, it is clear that the mare in Daniel 8:16 could only refer to the appearance of the two holy ones in Daniel 8:13 and 14 because of the position of this reference in the chapter. The important distinction to be made here is that verses 3 through 12, which describe the activity of the beasts and the little horn, should be defined as a hazon vision, whereas these appearances of the two holy ones in Gabriel, either the first appearance or both appearances, should be defined by way of contrast with the word mare. The application of these words proposed here may be outlined. Daniel 8 through verses 3 through 12, the visions of the beast and the little horn should be understood as the hazon. Verses 13 and 14, the intravisional appearance and explanation of the two holy ones, or the mare. Verses 15 through 26, the extravisional appearances and explanation of Gabriel could be included in the mare, but does not have to be. It cannot be included in the mare of Daniel 8:16, which refers to what Gabriel was to explain. This explanatory function of Daniel 8:15 through 26 makes the primary application of all three of these occurrences of mare refer to 8:13 through 14, regardless of how one relates them to 8:15 through 26. There is one occurrence of the word hazon that at first glance might appear to contradict the interpretation of mare proposed here. And that is the occurrence of this word in Daniel 9:21, where Daniel refers to Gabriel as the one whom I had seen in the hazon vision at first. Did Daniel refer to the personal appearance of Gabriel, which should have been described as a mare according to the interpretation of the word advanced here, as a hazon instead in this verse? If he did, then the distinction drawn between the technical application of the two words proposed above cannot be upheld. However, there is some qualifying information available from this verse that points in the opposite direction. It is important to note that Daniel specifically refers to his view of Gabriel in 9:21 as occurring in the first or beginning vision. The word connected with hazon here is tehillah, which occurs in the Old Testament about 20 times. Most of these occurrences this word here, the question remains, which was the first or beginning, hazon or vision, to which Daniel refers in 9:21. This question is answered for us by Daniel 8:1, which refers back to the vision of chapter 7 as that which appeared to Daniel at first. And as much as the same word, or tehillah, as much as the word is used to modify vision here as in Daniel 9:21, the vision of chapter 7 must also be the vision to which Daniel referred to in the latter passage. This means that Daniel saw Gabriel in the vision of chapter 7 also. If that interpretation is correct, the question is, where is Gabriel in chapter 7? In this case, we may turn to the intravisional explanation given there, for it was given by, quote, one of those who stood there, end quote. Chapter 7, verse 16. In the great scene of the heavenly court in session. The attendant who came to Daniel's aid in that case, although he is not named there, must have been Gabriel, according to the reference made of him in chapter 9, verse 21. Gabriel is not designated by name as the messenger sent to Daniel in chapter 10 either. But that identification certainly is a logical one because by virtue of his 3 previous appearances, Daniel was well acquainted with him. In other words, Gabriel was the interpreter/messenger who appeared on each occasion when Daniel was given all 4 of his major prophecies. This is explicitly stated in 8:16 and 9:21. Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. 9:21 says, and while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen at the beginning, refers back to 7:16, which reads, I came near unto one of them that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of the things. In other words, he was yet to identify Gabriel in chapter 7. Chapter 8, he's identified, but he's clearly referring to the same messenger/interpreter, heaven's messenger. And it's strongly implied from the informant in chapter 10. Thus, one reason why Daniel might have referred to Gabriel in the Ha-zone of chapter 7 rather than using the word mare for that appearance is that Gabriel was a participant in the court scene that the prophet saw. However, there's an additional explanation that might take precedence over this one. The vision of chapter 7 was described, interpreted, and recorded, with the exception of the last 3 verses in Aramaic. Mare does not occur in Aramaic, and the common Hebrew root, ra'ah, from which the word is derived, does not occur as a cognate in Aramaic. Of course, Daniel 7 is the last chapter, which is in Aramaic. Therefore, when referring back to the Aramaic written vision in chapter 7, it would have been natural for Daniel as a fluent bilingual speaker to refer to that appearance of Gabriel as having occurred in a Ha-zone, a cognate with Aramaic hazev, which occurs 6 times in Daniel 7, verses 1, 2, 7, 13, 15, and 20. In other words, the distinction between mare and Ha-zone as proposed here in an intra-Hebrew phenomenon that applies only to the prophecies of Daniel given in Hebrew, namely chapters 8 through 12. It does not apply in the case of chapter 7, which was written in Aramaic, to which Daniel applied the antecedent appearance of Gabriel referred to in Daniel 9:21. In other words, when he says, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. Thus, this exceptional occurrence of Ha-zone in 9:21 does not provide sufficient evidence to contradict the basic distinction drawn above between the technical application of Ha-zone as a vision, referring to the beasts and their activities in general, and the mare, referring more specifically to the appearance of personal beings, such as the holy ones, in chapter 8, and God himself in chapter 10. We may now summarize this brief study of the technical terminology used for different aspects of the prophecies in Daniel. When Gabriel used the word mare in Daniel 9:23 to refer to the portion of the prophecy of chapter 8 that he had come to explain, he referred not just to that vision in general, but more specifically to the mare, or appearance, of the 2 holy ones as recorded in Daniel 8:13 and 14. Which it says, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spoke, how long shall the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, or evening mornings, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Because the primary point of information told in that appearance was one relating to time, the 2,300 evening mornings during which the sanctuary and its services were cast down, and because Gabriel's new explanation directed to that mare begins with an additional element of time, namely the 70 weeks, or 490 years. The reference to mare in Daniel 9:23 relates the 70 weeks to the 2,300 evenings and mornings ever more directly, along with the connections already observed in the preceding sections of this study.